Good morning. I am going to be presenting a Defeasible Logic implementation of ethical reasoning. This project was completed by Dr. Louise, a senior lecturer at the University of Manchester, and myself, Cristina Perea del Olmo, and I'm currently a master's student at University College Dublin. Last year I was at the University of Manchester. So the motivation and the main question we were asking in this project was that we wanted to study how easy it would be to represent ethical reasoning computationally using defeasible logic. So implementations of ethics might need to be signed off or approved by stakeholders, and defeasible logic does provide a way to separate general rules from exceptions, and this might make the presentation of ethical rules easier. So our work here aims to ask what defeasible logic can add to this field, rather than establishing that logic programming approach to machine ethics is feasible. Machine ethics wants to study how to implement ethical reasoning in machines, and there are several approaches to do this. But in this project, we followed John Horty's suggestion to use defeasible logic as an approach to the implementation of deontic logic style machine ethics. So basically, ethics is going to be encoded as rules. Specifically, what he proposes is that simple odds are treated as defeasible statements. So, for example, a simple odd in a COVID-19 situation would be you ought to get vaccinated. For most people, this will define the ethical course of action, but we're going to be able to find exceptions in which this statement or obligation is no longer going to hold. So, for example, if a person has a specific contraindication towards an element of the vaccine, they are not obligated to get vaccinated. So this is the kind of reasoning that we're implementing in this project. And to illustrate a bit better how defeasible logic works, I'm going to present a really simple example, very similar to the Tweety the bird triangle, but in this case, we're going to have Charlie the whale. So first of all, we have the same fact that Charlie is a whale, and we know that all whales are mammals, and since there are no exceptions to this statement, we're going to classify this rule as a strict rule. We then have that mammals generally live on dry land, and we can find some exceptions to this statement. So this is going to be a defeasible rule, and we're going to call it R1. With just this information, we could get to the conclusion that Charlie lives on dry land because it's a whale. Whales are mammals. Mammals generally live on dry land. So we need to here's where the defeater comes into play. We are going to define the new rule, and let's call it R2 in this case, that is going to say whales do not live on dry land. We're going to give this rule a higher priority than rule R1, and like that we can get to the conclusion that obviously Charlie does not live on dry land. The fact that we can retract conclusions based on new premises, further information, makes defeasible logic a type of non-monotonic logic. It models reasoning in which some conclusions are drawn only in the absence of evidence to the contrary. So we're going to be translating this defeasible logic into Prolog, and for that we give more of a formal approach to it. So we're going to define a defeasible theory to be a triple of two sets and a relation. So we have the set F of facts. So for example, in our previous case, Charlie being a whale, R is going to be the set of rules, and then we're going to use the symbol less than as the superiority relation between these rules in the set R. In this set of rules, we have the rules we have discussed before, so strict rules, which are going to be indisputable. We're not going to retract any conclusions we get to following these rules. We have defeasible rules, which are generally gonna be true, but if we find further information, they can be retracted, as for example, it was R1. And we have defeaters that are going to provide that additional evidence to prevent a conclusion, R2 in our previous example. We're going to be working with a term language, L, constructed from variables, constants, and functions. And we are also defining the following. So we're going to have literals, which are going to be propositions, P or their negation, not P. We denote the complement as tilde P, so the complement of the literal P is not P and vice versa. And then we're going to extend the language with the OT operator, BIGO, so that if we have the literal L and we have the constants C, using the OT operator, this will read as C ought to do L. This is going to be equivalent to the obligation operator in most deontic logics, but we follow Horty's terminology in this project. And we're also going to be defining an odd complement, so that if we have this statement P, which is C ought to do L, its complement would be C ought not to do L. We used a pre-existing formalization of the defeasible logic, DL, and we extended it so that we could deal with odd statements. So for a defeasible theory, a conclusion is going to be of one of the following four forms. It's going to be definitely provable, not definitely provable, defeasibly provable, or not defeasibly provable in D. So, so for example, if we have that a literal is definitely provable, it is then a fact, or it is derived using only strict rules from facts. And this is represented as formal proofs using quite a lot of logic. So the details to this formalization can be found in the paper for those of you who are interested. And here I am showing a bit of the program. Before I said what it means to be definitely provable, and this bit of program represents that. And we can see that DL has a natural translation into Prolog. So we evaluated our defeasible logic implementation of ethical reasoning in 2 case studies. This first case study, we used the rules and guidances around COVID-19 control. So we present the following set of rules, and we're going to be using the Prolog convention where variables are represented as uppercase letters. So for example, we have the defeasible rules, X ought to get vaccinated, or X ought to wear a face mask. If X has a health condition, then it is not the case that X ought to get vaccinated. And we also have the defeater, if X is a keyword, then it is not the case that X ought not to go to work. And we define priorities between these rules. For this case study, we have 2 individual cases. We have Miss C, who has a health condition, is a key worker, and has not been vaccinated, and Miss L, who has not been vaccinated. So the previous rules I have just shown state that a person ought to get vaccinated and wear a face mask. However, if they have a health contraindication, like for example, Miss C, they're not obligated to get vaccinated. Therefore, Miss C is not going to be obligated to get vaccinated, but because she has not been vaccinated, she ought not to go to the pub and she ought to wear a face mask. This is following the previous rules. And because she's a key worker, she's not obligated not to go to work. Miss L, additionally, ought to get vaccinated and not to go to work. We evaluated another case study based on a discussion of medical ethics. This is more of a complex case study, which you can find in the paper if you're interested. And it is based around the principle of autonomy in medical ethics. So finally, as we have seen, defeasible logic is straightforward to implement, And the ability to state rules without having to list all possible exceptions makes the formalization clearer in many places. And for one of our cases of study, it did present ethical rules very naturally. However, there are some challenges. There are several areas where this formalization is not completely satisfactory. In particular, there are some issues around time sequencing and planning that the system cannot handle. And there is a clear potential to use machine learning for capturing rule requirements. So Defeasible Logic is clearly a promising approach to the implementation of machine ethics in some applications, and it is definitely worth further information, investigation, sorry. Thank you.